Hello, my name is Evan Schwartz, and we're going to take a look at adding a consumable in-app purchase mechanic to the RollaSquish app. You may remember from a previous video, this is a game where you're using the accelerometer of the mobile device to cause a bowl to roll around within a playing field, trying to squish worms that are coming up and down within that playing field. One of the super mechanics of the game is the ability to spawn a roller that is the entire height of the playing field that will roll all the way down, squishing anything within the playing field. So for my in-app consumable purchase, I decided to give the player the ability to buy more rollers. The roller mechanic in the game only spawns, you get one roller per level. If you consume that roller and you lose the level, you don't get another one until you beat the level and go to the next level, in which case you will get one for that level as well. So this sort of allows the player to purchase additional rollers to get past cumbersome levels. Setting up the in-app purchases within Unity is fairly basic. There was a little bit of a gotcha on this. The documentation says, enable analytics and enable in-app purchases, and then when you go into the in-app purchase process, it'll ask you some COPA questions about age groups and that sort of thing, and then you just click on import, and everything you need for the Unity IAP is added to the project. Well, it didn't work quite that way. Despite how many times I turned this on and off, I clicked on import. It simply said, sorry, you can't do this until you turn on the in-app purchasing module, in services, which I thought I had. Ultimately, what I ended up having to do is go into the packet manager and manually add the package for in-app purchases to my project, and after having done that, then I was able to go through the import, and it built out my plugins folder within my project that had all the Unity purchasing, wire up, and everything that you would need to do in purchasing. So once this is in place, it's high speed, low drag from there. We'll go ahead and just go through a quick demo and play it. I turned the sound down on this so it wouldn't be too obnoxious during this demo. Essentially, you can see I already have 12 rollers purchased, so I've been buying quite a few. But it's pretty simple. Buy a roller, added a button to the main menu, and it pops up, are you sure? Rollers cost 50 cents. This was part of the Apple best practices. Make sure the user has an opportunity to not accidentally purchase something and give them the ability to cancel out. Or if they want to go for it's like a double opt-in process, they hit buy and it goes through the process. This is sort of my output log that's walking me through all the processes in the background, letting me know what's going on, and then it bumps it up to 13. Now, when I get into the game, because this game was designed for accelerometers, I'm unable to actually tip my computer and get the game field to move around, but I can still click on things. And if I simulate the two-finger touch by touching both of my left and right mouse button, I can consume my rollers. You can imagine that roller rolling to the left there and squishing over everything, trying to kill these worms and hit your goal, kills to go, before you can get to the next level. And essentially that's it. You're just consuming your rollers as you go through, and we'll take a look at the code to make all that happen. So once you've got your Unity package kind of deployed into your program, it's fairly high speed, low drag from there. Everything sort of operates in a purchaser script. Now this is their boilerplate purchaser script. I've got this zoomed up a little bit here so you can see the code a little bit easier, but the pieces that I've made changes to is I've added a roller text object that allows me to output to my main menu as you're purchasing rollers, because it's an event-based system. So you initiate the purchase, it goes out to Apple or Google, they grind on it a little bit, and then do a callback to your app saying, hey, this purchase is completed. So at that point, you may not get an immediate feedback like you saw running there. So we need to be able to visually output to the user. All the products need to have a very specific provisioning ID. So to get this to work on my Apple phone, I would have had to spin up my Apple developer account, tie it to my bank account, get a bunch of tax forms filled out, and set up a provisioning profile and tie it to my game. So that was a little bit over the top for really what it is we're trying to achieve here, which is to show how you would wire this up in a game. At that point, you're really just in the Apple developer console creating this unique ID, right? So in my case, for my game, I wanted to create a roller. You're tying that provisioned item as an in-app purchase to that game within your Apple developer product. And then what this tool set does is at the time of purchase, calls out to the store of choice and says, hey, do you happen to have a com.nobelhouseschwartz.rollasquish.roller product for 50 cents configured? If you do, fantastic, this customer would like to buy it. And then it goes through the purchasing process and then lets me know if the purchasing was successful. After that point, it just manages the store controller and does initializing of the purchase. All we're doing here is telling the encode object about all of my in-app purchases that I've configured in my developer console. So in that case, that's this thing. And I'm creating that product and adding it to my configuration, my builder instance. So this is a very specific instance. This only gets created one. It's kind of like a singleton. And this is my product ID, and I'm identifying it as a consumable. So once I've purchased it, it can be consumed and repurchased over and over again. And then that basically I initialize the Unity purchasing engine and pass in my little collection, my builder object, and assign it to this object. This is this initialized to make sure it doesn't get initialized more than once. Ultimately, it comes down to this call here by consumable. This is syntactical sugar by product ID, passes in that ID. This is a one-off. So really, this is the workhorse where it passes in the product ID, it makes sure that we're initialized. It goes and checks with the store that that product exists, and if the product doesn't exist, various levels of fail. No purchasing product available, it's not initialized, blah, blah, blah. Otherwise, goes through the purchasing process and initiates the purchase. Now, at this point, it's still not complete because the person may not have an appropriate way to purchase it or funds to purchase it. So at this point, you don't know, but you've gotten through the general gauntlet. I've initialized everything properly, and everything is set up in my App Store appropriately. This is just part of their boilerplate for restoring purchases. It's for iOS. On my initialize, this just is sort of falling back to let me know that everything's been initialized, and I can store references to my controller and my extensions if I need to. If it failed, again, just what can I do if it failed? Oh my gosh, something's going wrong. Maybe I can turn those features off on my menu if it failed. But ultimately, this is the other workhorse piece that we have to do, is it comes in here if everything is successful and everything looks the way it's supposed to. I can grab my product ID consumable, realize that the purchase was complete, and this is right now the only one I have set up, so this is just extra checking to make sure it was in fact the consumable product that was purchased. And if so, I'm just outputting to my log so that I can see that it happened. But in this case, this is the piece that matters. I'm essentially figuring out how many rollers I already have purchased. I'm pulling it from my player prefs. I'm incrementing it by one, and then I'm saving it back. So this is the actual act of giving the player what they've purchased. And then I'm finding my roller count text object, and I'm updating that label so that there's feedback to the user that the object was in fact purchased. And this would be called if the purchase failed, in which case, other than notifying the user unable to make purchase, nothing significant there happens. For the menu, we have a button on there that says Buy Rollers. Essentially, I'm just pulling out the purchaser script, which is essentially this thing we just went over, and making sure it's not null. And then I'm just calling that one syntactical sugar method by consumable. And once that's done, I'm done with it, and it increments my my roller bars. So at that point, it comes down to how are we giving the user the rollers. So we'll sort of step through here. Let's go all the way back to the top. So we've got our standard rollers, and as I said before, that is at the beginning of each level you get one roller and one roller to complete the level. So if you fail and have to repeat the level, you don't get another roller. And then this is our purchase rollers that we are just keeping up with how many have you purchased. So at this point, this is the level state. So I'm just making sure I'm grabbing from my player prefs how many rollers I have at the beginning of each level. And based on my business logic here, if you haven't lost this level, you'll get a roller when we start it. So at this point, I'm adding how many rollers you're given to by level to how many you've purchased, and if they're greater than 0, then it's even worth checking to see if you've done your two-touch. I added this so we could demo it on the desktop, so if you're pressing the left and right mouse button, that's going to equate to doing a two-finger touch on the interface. It deducts the in-game roller first, the one that was given to you for free. If that's dropped below 0, it resets it to 0, deducts from your purchase rollers. If your purchase rollers drops below 0, this is just a safety catch line of code to make sure you don't go to negative, and then updates your preferences with the number of rollers you have left, and that's it. That's the entirety of implementing a purchased item. There's not a lot to it. And then at this point, we're just keeping up with on the screen how many rollers you have. We're adding the two together and converting it to a string. So as you can see, not very complicated. There's a lot of upfront wire up. I think there's more configuration and wire up than there is coding to implement in-app purchases, particularly around the consumable parts. But that's it in a nutshell, soup to nuts. I hope you enjoyed it.